Hey tubers, too bad, crazy people. It's me and baby Mae and of course Gaylord back there.
Yes.
So anyway, the title of this little video we're going to do is called The Money Pit. Boy, there's so many classifications of money pits that we could go in 20 different directions, but for the sake of all of us, I won't. But what Mae really wanted to talk about and wanted me to talk about was loaning money out here in the Philippines and how that can turn into a big ass money pit. Pardon my French. Recently, May made friends with a person, and we're not going to use any names,
Yeah.
and they made a little video, and May had 300 pesos on her, and she gave the young lady 100 pesos
Yeah.
to buy food.
Yes.
And 5 minutes later, she said she lost it.
Yeah.
And because she saw the three, and maybe she tried to score on that. So, and then you gave her mother 1,000 pesos,
Yeah.
I think, because they had some sort of a deal. I've had my fair share of snafus also, of lending money. And the bottom line out here is with Filipinos and Filipinas that are in financial dire straits, if you will, is you're never going to see the money again. So if you're going to loan money to them, quote unquote, you're giving them the money. And so, and I'm good with that. If somebody really needs the money and there's really something that's going on in their world that needs attention, if I have the ability to do so, and May too, she has given people money out of her own pocket, just out of the goodness of her heart, to help them through whatever little crisis they might be going through. And so that's that. The Philippines gets kind of a bad rap, I think, with the whole scammer thing and this and that and the other, and we won't go in that direction. But what I wanted to address was the problem with loaning money to other foreigners. That has been the eye-opener for me. And I'll give you two quick examples. There was one guy a couple of years ago that borrowed a couple, 3,000 pesos from me, and then the next day he paid me right back, and he offered an extra 500 pesos along with it as, like, you know, a thank you. And I refused it. And little did I know, he was trying to set me up for the fall. And a few days later, he borrowed a quick 1,000 pesos from me and told me that he needed to buy diapers for his kid. And I said, yeah, no problem. And a little later on that day, I drove down to a bar that's no longer open here in town, and they had a poker game in there back in the day, and that's all since been dissolved. But lo and behold, I went in there to have lunch, and he was sitting at the poker table with my 1,000 pesos, and that that action spoke 1,000 words. And so and it took forever to get that 1,000 pesos back from that guy, and I was bound and determined to get it. I wanted it. I was pissed. The real capper is a guy that, again, I'm really reticent about naming names, but a couple of years ago, we were living at Highland Villas.
Yeah.
And this guy I met at Robinson's in the parking lot. He approached me. He had seen a couple of YouTube videos. And this guy, I'd never ever in my 60 some odd years of walking the planet, I have never really encountered what you would call a con man. I've heard of them. I've watched TV series about them, and but never had any real personal dealings with or experiences with them. And this guy was a con man, and he had me and everybody that he talked to conned. And what was really interesting about this guy was when I first met him, his story was that he had too much money. And he kept this, he was retired Navy, I guess, He had all these different income streams from the Navy. He had income streams from Social Security and from this place and from that place. And he was saying things to me like, man, he goes, I got like 7,000, 8,000 a month coming in, and I'm having a tough time spending $3. I don't know what to do. And he told that story over and over and over again to anybody and everybody that he met. And he stuck to it. And then, and that was it was a long game, because the guys and I that knew him, we've discussed it since. He played everybody for the long game. He invited me over one time when he was laid up. He had been into an accident and he couldn't get to the ATM. And he asked me to come over and go down to the ATM and pull out some money for him. And I did. I didn't want to. It was, not really convenient. I really didn't want to drive all the way up the hill at the time and deal with all that and then go to an ATM and then pull out his money and this, that, and the other. But I did. I thought I would do him a solid. And I went and got him 10,000 pesos, I think he wanted. And he had a young lady working for him. And so he was laid up because he had broken his leg. And I got him his money. And he had bought a camera. And he said, hey, look, I got you something. And I thought he was talking about a gift. He said, look, he showed me this goofy little camera, little tiny thing. No, it wasn't a GoPro. That's an expensive camera. This was just like a little camera, but it had all these accessories on it, and but it was like a GoPro because it could screw onto your helmet or something like that. And he says, I thought about you, and I saw this camera, and I bought it for you. And I looked at the camera, and I'm like, dude, I don't want this camera. It's too little. I appreciate it and everything, but it's got these little tiny buttons on it, and I don't do, videos on my bike. I just sit in my couch and rattle on about stuff. And he says, no, I really want you to have it. I really want you to have it. I really want you to have it. And I said, okay, I'll take it, just to shut him up. And then he said, I only need 1.5 for it. He says, I paid 3, but I only want 1.5 because I was thinking of you. And I said, oh, you're selling me the camera. And I said, man, I really appreciate it, but I didn't want it as a gift. And now I really don't want it because I don't want to pay for something that I have no interest in. And I actually had to take it home with me. He kept insisting. And I said, okay, I'll take it home and I'll look at it. And I'll let you know. So I took it home. And a buddy of mine came over. And I was telling him the story. And he looked up the camera online. And he says, he only paid 400 pesos for this camera. That was the first red flag. And so then he started hounding me, saying that he needed the camera back or he needed the money because everybody wants this camera now, and blah 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 blah. And I just dreaded going up there because I was pissed off at him. And so finally I went back and I returned the camera. He put together an attorney because when he was in the hospital, he didn't have or purported not to have any money to pay for the hospital bill. And he had an attorney that was working on some case for him related to something else. And the attorney, a Filipino attorney, gave him 100,000 pesos to help him pay his hospital bill. That's how much they trusted him. And then he had all these reasons to borrow money from people, and they were giving it to him. They were giving him 50,000. They were giving him 100,000. They were giving him 25,000. These were his neighbors, because he had this story that the money was tied up somewhere, and he had, remember, for 6 or 7 months he had played the long game, kept talking about all this money that he had, and he kept promising these guys, you know what, dude, you give me 50,000, and I'll be more than happy to knock you back 60. It'll only be a couple of days, and they took it. He offered me, or he asked me for money. I said, no, that's okay. I remember the little camera incident. And so, long story short, he hadn't paid his rent for 3 months. He hadn't paid the helper that he had. He told her he was going to marry her, and therefore he didn't need to pay her because they were going to live this beautiful life of luxury together. And then just one day he just disappeared, and boom, he was gone. So what's the moral of the story? The moral of the story is, and one thing that I'm proud of, is that I never broke my own promise that I made to myself when I first came over here. I knew I was going to make mistakes, but I said never make a mistake that's going to be life-changing as far as finances go. In other words, if you're gonna pick up a check, or you're gonna loan somebody some money, or you're gonna do this, or you're gonna do that, always make it in an increment that it won't change my lifestyle. $20 here, $20 there, and I stayed to that. And thank God I didn't get into the 100,000, 50,000, 75,000 peso level. And I believe most of that is he understood that people are at their core pretty much greedy, and they like a good thing. And he had built up this phenomenal backstory. Now, on a lighter note, with Mae's situation, there's a little story that I'd like to share with you, and then we'll call it a day. A few months back, I bought a car, and it turned out to be a lemon, and I ended up selling the car. Yeah. And gratefully, I broke even on the deal. I think I lost $100 or $200 or something like that. Yeah. It wasn't a lot. And I told Mae, I said, I'm really sorry that we didn't keep the car, because she was just, enamored with the fact that we were going to be able to drive out and see more of her family, because it's too long of a drive for me to risk on the motorbike. It's just, I get too tired too fast. And we just had our friend Bill crash. Yeah. He was driving out. And so, anyway, when I told Mae that, she said something that just took me off, put me back on my heels. She goes, the only thing I regret is that my father was really looking forward to sitting in the car. I said, you mean he wants to drive the car? She said, no. I said, he wants to go for a ride in the car? She said, no. He just wants to sit in it. He's never sat in a car. And I couldn't even fathom that. And it took me a few days to kind of process that information, that this man's never sat in a car. And then as I analyzed the information, I thought about Mae's lifestyle and where she came from. Her parents were always poor. Yeah. They had 7 kids. They lived out in the province. They didn't have any friends with cars. I don't think they even had motorbikes. It was pretty much walking and a little public transportation with like trikes and stuff like that. But I finally, I was able to put it in my head, him sitting in the car would be the equivalent of me being able to sit for 10 minutes inside of like an F-16 fighter jet or the space shuttle. That would be a thrill for me, just, wow, this thing. But the caveat and the funny part was, in my head, I thought we'd drive out in a car and I'd pick him up, we'd go in front of the house, and not just sit in the car, but we'd go for a ride. And we'd drive around through town and kind of look at stuff, and maybe if he wants to, he could wave at his friends and show off a little bit or something like that. And Mae put me right in my place on that. Because she said, no, if we go out there, you can't park the car in front of the house. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Because you have to park the car down on the road. and they would have to walk to the car, and then my dad would sit in it. But we can't let anybody see him sitting in the car. And the result would be if they saw a car pull up and him hop in it, and God forbid a couple other people hop in, and I take everybody to lunch or something, the neighbors are going to come out of the woodwork.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. His daughter's got a foreigner boyfriend. They're really rich. And so he said it would take about 10 minutes and the guys would come knocking on the door saying, hey, let's drink some Red Horse.
Yeah.
In other words, on you. Or Dad. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's correct.
So much of this out here is perception. I'm still learning. So anyway, that's the thing about loaning money out here, kids. It's just what I've learned. I'm not telling you what to do. You follow your own heart, your own instincts, whatever you think is right. I have found the best answer when someone says, hey, can I borrow? My answer is I just don't loan money. But I will correct that with the fact that there are 4 or 5 guys out here that if they called me up and they said, hey, Paul, I'm in the hospital, can you help me? Absolutely. Because I know them. I know their character. I know what kind of guys they are. And I would have absolutely no doubt whatsoever that as soon as they were able to get to the bank, they'd get the money and give it back to me. And conversely, I've had a number of guys say to me, which is quite a compliment, hey, Paul, I'll give you whatever you needed because I know you're good for it. But that's kind of the story about the money pit of loaning money. There's a million different directions we could go on this. How girlfriends can drain you for money. How businesses that you try to start can drain you for money. How houses that you're trying to build can drain you for money. But I thought it was prudent just to try to stick to this one topic, or else we'd talk for hours. So anyway, I want to thank you for stopping by. Baby Mae says hello, right?
Yes.
And we want to promote your channel as usual. What's your channel name?
So guys, please watch my channel today with me, and please watch to the Post channel. So guys, thank you so much for watching to the Post channel. Bye bye.
All right, we'll leave you guys with that. See you later.